The world has been destroyed, and an army from beyond time and space seeks dominion over what remains. A group of powerful androids have but one hope: to climb the tower and finally defeat these otherworldly invaders once and for all. Critadel is a 2D action platformer with roguelite elements. In it, you play as a powerful warrior who's been given the task of climbing a mysterious tower full of monsters, minions, and mechs in the hopes that defeating this army will prevent them from conquering our entire dimension. At the start of each game, you'll be given a basic weapon and sent into a randomly generated level. The levels themselves are divided into a number of rooms, arrayed in grid-like fashion, with each room having a different configuration of enemies, platforms, traps, and treasure. When you do encounter enemies, you'll be able to run around the room, jump on any platforms, and fire your weapon in a full 360-degree arc. You also have a dodge roll that can quickly get you out of the way of enemy attacks and even negate enemy bullets if used with precise timing. Defeating all of the enemies or overcoming all of the traps will allow you to complete a room. This will allow you to proceed in order to the next rooms in the level, making your way until you eventually reach the boss. Defeating enemies and bosses will often result in material rewards as well. Sometimes you'll find consumables such as grenades or health pickups. Sometimes you'll find equipment such as weapon attachments, which increase the power of your guns, or artifacts, which give you constant passive bonuses such as increased health or stamina. Most of the time, you'll be getting money, which can be spent at shops in order to buy new gear, or at vending machines to buy health and weapon power-ups. But a lot of the time, you'll be picking up new guns, each of which can be added to your arsenal up to a total of 9. New guns that you collect get added to your inventory, and you can swap between them at any time. In addition, having multiple guns of the same type can increase their overall power. For example, having multiple shotguns in your backpack increases their overall damage, while having multiple machine guns increases their firing speed. Also, while your guns do need to be reloaded, they have no limit on ammunition, and can be fired almost indefinitely. But if you use them too often, it lowers their durability, at which point they might eventually break and become unusable. As I said before, your goal is to battle your way through level after level, trying to reach the top of the tower. While you might occasionally stumble across a helpful merchant or vending machine, most of the time you'll be facing off against waves of increasingly dangerous enemies. And as is tradition with most roguelites, if you die, you lose everything that you've accumulated and are sent back to the beginning to start over, with the layout of the levels being randomized for your next playthrough. However, if you can make it all the way to the end of a level and defeat the boss, you can get permanent rewards. Some bosses will unlock new guns and equipment that will be available on all future playthroughs. Other bosses will reward you with metacurrency, which you can use to either unlock cosmetics that you can equip on your character, or can purchase bonus items that can be used at the start of the game. And whether you succeed or fail, you'll also get experience points, which can be used to unlock skills for each of the 3 main characters of the game, giving them small bonuses that can improve their individual performance. Now, the things I like about Critadel float easily to the top. For starters, the presentation is really nice. It has this retro 16-bit art style with lots of colorful characters and enemies. The game's handling is also good. Movement and shooting feel very responsive, and it's easy to quickly run, dodge, and jump in rapid succession. The pacing of the game is pretty good. Having all of the levels divided up into bite-sized rooms means that it's easy to tell where you are and how far you are from the level end, but the distribution of rooms is sometimes unhelpful. You'll, for instance, get to some levels where there are no merchants, or the merchants that are there are clustered up on top of one another. Also, there's a bunch of different randomized vending machines, leading to situations where occasionally there's just nothing you either can or even want to buy. But the standout, and really the big draw of Critadel, is the weapons. There are over 50 different types of guns in the game, and that's not even including passive gear like attachments and artifacts. And as mentioned before, the game encourages you to collect up to 9 of them, not only to expand your arsenal, but also to take advantage of weapon synergies which increase their overall power. And to the game's credit, there's a great selection here. You've got everything from pistols to shotguns to machine guns to more unusual weapons like flamethrowers or freeze rays, up onto completely esoteric stuff like laser guns and bounce projectiles. It is a ton of fun going through each new run, finding new guns, new gear, and new wacky combinations. Now, as for complaints, I've only really got one big one, but I do have to admit there are a number of design elements of the game that are broken isn't exactly the right word. Perhaps unhelpful is the way to put it. For instance, the game has a map that allows you to see the distribution of rooms in any given level, except that the map is locked by default at the start of each new run, and you can only reveal the actual layout of the rooms if you get a specific artifact. Without it, all of the rooms are hidden, and you can only use the map to see the distance until you reach the boss, which is not helpful. Another example is your weapon collection. Conceptually, having 9 different guns at your disposal sounds awesome, except that there's no easy or convenient way to swap between them. If you're playing with the keyboard, you can hit a button to instantly jump to any specific weapon, but that requires you to be constantly memorizing all of the guns in your arsenal and their relative positions. Because remember, this is a roguelite, so the firearms in each of your quick slots are going to be different every time. And if you're playing with a controller, there's not even anything close to that option. You can quick select one gun, and then for the rest, you've got to scroll through them manually. Again, not helpful. Then there's weapon durability, which exists, I presume, as a way to encourage you to swap out different weapons. If you use one gun over and over, it will eventually break and you won't be able to fire it anymore. It works in theory, but there's no actual incentive to be swapping guns during combat. And if you can get a certain combination of skills and artifacts, you can basically ignore weapon durability entirely. In the end, the only point of it seems to be that if a really good laser gun drops early on, to prevent you from just using that exclusively to solo the rest of the bosses for the entire game. Heads up, every time I beat the game, it was because a really good laser gun dropped early on, and I used it to solo the bosses for the rest of the game. So, yeah. And finally, there's recycling, which theoretically sounds like it might have some actual utility. Being able to scrap 2 guns that you're not using for the chance to randomly get a different gun that you might be able to incorporate into your arsenal. Except that the recycling process is entirely random, meaning you can scrap 2 guns of high rarity and wind up getting a gun of lower rarity, which is a worse option than if you had just sold the guns and pocketed the cash. In fact, it's so random that it's even possible to get a duplicate copy of one of the guns that you tried to scrap, meaning that recycling can be not just unhelpful, it can occasionally be pointless. Now, despite all those nitpicks, the only real flaw I think the game has is its visuals. And I'm not talking about the aesthetics of the game, the design of the characters and enemies and backgrounds. No, I think that stuff looks great. Rather, I'm talking about the visuals on screen. The problem I have is that there's often way too much clutter that makes it hard to tell what's going on screen. This is a game where, in addition to moving your character, running around, jumping, dodging, firing your weapons, you're also having to watch out for your opponents, for their positioning, where they're aiming. You're having to watch out for enemy projectiles. Some of those projectiles can look identical to the bullets that you are firing. On top of that, the screen is filled with foreground objects, background objects, midground objects. Explosions can cover parts of the environment. Spikes and traps can be hidden inside of the walls and floors. There's also debris from destructible boxes that can be scattered throughout the environment. Some of them can block projectiles. Some of them can block multiple projectiles. And then there are the bosses who routinely have bullet hell strategies where they just fill the entire screen with projectiles. And that's not even accounting for the enemies that can attack you from off-screen while you're trying to get down the timing on these temporary platforms so that you can actually jump up and fight them, because if you miss even once, you fall back down to the bottom of the level. And I just, come on, get up there. Oh my gosh, around this, oh geez. In a high-speed action game like this, visual clutter can be a death sentence. And even though it was rare, I still got into situations like this, where in between trying to keep track of my own projectiles, enemy projectiles, foreground and background objects, I get into a situation like this, where opponents with freeze grenades are capable of stun-locking me to death. Critadel is one of those games that's just shy of greatness. At the highest level, it delivers everything that you'd expect from it. Fast-paced action platforming, randomized roguelite level designs, and an extensive variety of guns and gear for you to experiment with as you're blasting your way through each area. However, every time I got into the specifics, I was a little frustrated, whether it's the distribution of power-ups and rooms in a level, the way that certain enemies can attack you from off-screen, or the technicalities of the game's visual flair that means you can occasionally lose track of your character and enemy projectiles. I really enjoyed the run-and-gun aspects of Critadel, but occasionally I felt like I was getting killed by things that really weren't my fault. And in a roguelite, that's especially frustrating. In the end, I would give Critadel 3 out of 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody that's looking for an action platformer where the focus is on blasting your way through randomized levels with a large variety of weapons. Alright, well, thanks for listening. The tower calls. So till next time, see ya.